Hello and welcome to my channel, Haylee Marie Vintage. Today we are doing a under $50 sewing project. I am trying to show you that sewing can be more affordable than sometimes perceived, and you can create high quality garments for yourself that are relatively affordable. So the goal for this project is to stay under that $50 mark. I'm hoping if we're magical, we can even maybe stay under 40, but we'll see. Sometimes things take some turns and things end up going a little higher in budget than I desire. But first, talking about the fabric, we have this lovely pink and white and yellow daisy floral that I picked up in Korea. This fabric is super cute. It does feel like it's a little bit pixelated maybe, but I think it will still turn out really, really great, especially with the pattern I'm using, which is this one, not upside down. Simplicity 3977. This is a pattern that I picked off at some point off of Etsy. I would really like to make both the dress and the bolero, but we're gonna see how much fabric I have. And this little pink dress, which is kind of the vibe I'm going for, but without the plaid, or I guess the gingham. But for this little pink dress, it has a little bit of trim. I'm hoping to dig up something in my stash that's pretty affordable from the thrift store that I can use to give this that little extra oomph that a bit of trim does. My plan is to do the bolero. I've been loving boleros, but again, we're gonna have to see what the yardage is. Sometimes there's not enough yardage for a bolero, or the yardage doesn't sit right. I won't be able to choose a bolero, and there's also potential I would need additional fabric for a bolero, so we're gonna check out and see what the vibe there is. But yeah, that's the plan. Hi, this is future Haylee. I didn't have this plan when I originally started this video, so I'm just popping in to let you know. I have been getting bombarded by Temu trying to sponsor me, so I thought I would devote this video to them and why you shouldn't buy from them. So I'm gonna have 6 reasons you shouldn't buy from them after my cost breakdown, in case you're curious. But back to past Haylee. I have no other plans this weekend but sewing, so hopefully that means I can get through this project so I can show it off to you very soon. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into cutting out the fabric. So before I start cutting this out, we had quite a change of plans. I went to look for that pattern in my pattern drawer, and that pattern apparently did not exist. So then I pivoted to a different pattern, which is on the screen right now, that I have used multiple times. I know I like this dress, and it's another dress with a bolero. I felt like it was a very similar vibe. But then when I pulled out this pattern, it didn't have the bolero pieces. So this morning of cutting things out did not start out correctly, and at this point I was feeling like pretty frustrated and like nothing was going right. But I continued along with cutting out this dress pattern anyway, and decided I would figure out what to do about the bolero later. I'm adding an extra 5/8 inch to the seam allowance on both sides. This is just to give me more wiggle room and fit and things like that. And other than that, I'm pretty much cutting this as normal. Spooky has decided now is the time to become a mass agent of chaos. So she is here and doing things and being wild and trying to get in the way of me cutting out my pieces. And then as always, this is your reminder that I do have a Patreon that you can go over and support me for $5 a month. This gets you access to early release of videos and the very right now occasional poll. But it's really just an avenue if you want to support my channel and my work more, because this takes a lot of time and a lot of money to keep this channel running. And now with the dress cut out, I can mark my darts. Before then pinning them, I'm going to do this for the back. I'm going to focus a lot on the back panel overall right now. I'm going to actually construct this a little bit different. I'm going to do the back panel like the bodice and skirt, and then the front panel. So we're doing it a little different today. Before going any further though, I did want to make sure to mark where my pockets go. I have like one pocket pattern piece that I cut all my pockets from, and then I just have to add the little marks to make sure my pockets go in like consistent placement, which is what I'm doing here via notch. And then I'm going to return to marking my darts, this time in the skirt. A lot of time gored skirts like these have additional darts because then it makes it so they don't have to do 2 separate gores. They can do instead 1 gore and a dart in the middle. That way you can pinch out enough of that volume in the waist to then give you that full skirt at the end. Once the darts are in, I'm just pressing them, and you can already see this begin to take its shape of being a more flared out skirt. And then I'm going to pin together all the skirt pieces to get that ready to assemble. Sewing them together with your normal straight stitch. And then for my seam finishing for this piece, I'm going to use pinking. This is a very tightly woven cotton, so I'm not too worried about it fraying after I pink it. And then to keep the inspiration going from the first pattern that I ended up not being able to use, I wanted to still have the lace at the bust line. So I am sewing this at a 5/8 seam allowance like the rest of the garment. And then what I'm going to do is flip this over and press it so you can't see kind of like that, the ugly part of the lace or the part of the lace that's supposed to be in the seam. And then I will attach that with a top stitch to the skirt panel, and I'll match the seam allowance, pin from behind, and then pin again from above so I can do that top stitch really, really cleanly and make sure all my seams and things are meeting all of its like marks. And here is me actually doing that top stitching. When you are top stitching on a project like this, it's really important to have a good thread match. I'm pretty like lackadaisical about my thread matching decisions, but in the case of a project like this that I top stitch, I try to be pretty good about getting them pretty close. And because I'm assembling the back panel first, I am going to put in the zipper before like assembling much more of the dress. It's way easier to put in the zipper when you're working with just a flat back panel. So I am first ironing all the weird little kinks that zippers get when you have them like from out of the box essentially. And then before I sew the back panels together, what I'm actually doing is marking where the end of my zipper needs to be using 2 pins, and above those 2 pins I'll baste, and below I'll do a usual straight stitch that will keep the fabric secure. Then once that's all pressed, I will unpick the basting stitch and get ready to put in my zip. So for me, zippers work best with minimal pinning. I have 2 key points that I pin. I pin the very top of the zipper and then the waist point of the zipper, and then I go down and around. I go down using like a very close seam finish on one side, and then I go up using a like placket allowance that's going to be kind of more like 3/8 of an inch. So one side is essentially like 1 to 0/8 of an inch, and the other is 3/8, and that 3/8 is the little flappy flap that covers the zipper. And what's really important with those pins is making sure when I get ready to do the placket that the pins for the waistline match like the zipper in the other case. Hopefully with the visuals this is making sense to you. It's totally okay if it doesn't though. It's always really challenging to show how I put in zippers because I try to avoid that like hand basting or over pinning zipper because zippers are already stressful enough for me as it is. And then with the zipper in, I am now doing the pleats on the bodice. The way that they have the pleats for this specific pattern are very confusing because they don't have any clear illustrations that are marked either inside or outside showing you the pleating on either the inside or the outside. So I did my best to like guess. I think it turned out correctly, but this is definitely the opposite way of how I've pleated things than when I've made this in the past. However, I haven't made this dress in a few years, so I might just be better at reading pleating and have done it wrong all those other years. But the pleating for this, not clear. The way it was marked, not clear. I really like the patterns that have the pleat lines drawn and then like a clear arrow in the direction they're supposed to go, and you always know that means the outside. This one just didn't have that. It just said bring this line to this line, and it didn't specify inside, outside, or anything, so I assumed by default they assume you're going to pin from the outside. So that is how I pleated. And then with those pleats basted in, I am now also going to baste in the lace the same way I did for the back. And with the bodice done, I am now going to focus on the skirt. Again, I have some of those really, really long darts to, again, take out some of the fullness in the waist to give you that like 50s classic look. From there, I am then going to pin all 4 of the front skirt panels together. Before then, sewing the bodice to the skirt the exact same way I did with the back panels. And then I didn't show you this, but I am actually using my pinking shears to finish this seam. This is just going to reduce a little bit of bulk but also give me a finished seam. I only do this now that I have pinking shears that don't like, I don't want to say like malfunction, but my old pinking shears would get like kind of caught and you'd have to use a lot of force, and then I would be at high risk for cutting a hole in the like normal parts of my fabric because of that. So now that I have these pinking shears, I've gotten much better about really truly making sure all of my seams, including these weird top stitched ones, are finished. And then with both panels completed, I am going to put in the pockets for both the front and the back of the skirt using the markings I made, and also these at 3/8 inch before pressing them open. And then with my sleeping supervisor looking on, I am going to also pin up the shoulder seams as well as the side seams before then focusing on sewing the side seams where I'm going to go down and around the pockets. With these ones, I'm sewing a 5/8 seam allowance, so you don't ever see the pockets because those were sewn with a 3/8 seam allowance. So there's a 1/4 inch like buffer between like where the pockets would stick out of the seam, if that makes sense. And then with everything assembled, I can quickly put the dress on and check where I need it for a hem. I forgot that this pattern is way way too long for me. This sits like firmly at like the bottom half of my calves, which I actually like for a lot of dress, but not for this type of cut. So I'm actually going to cut off 6 inches of the hem before then hemming this an additional couple inches. And for the hem, like usual with a rounded skirt like this, I'm first going to fold over to clean up the edge, and then I'm going to put in some basting stitches so I can eventually ease these in. But before I do that, I'm going to focus on the finishings. So I have 2 sleeve bindings and then the neck binding to focus on. So I'm first starting by sewing all the like correct bits together, matching, shoulder seams, matching the under armpit seams, all that good stuff. And then once that was done, I was doing the top stitch finishing of the edges of these facings. I did play thread chicken and I did lose, and I was annoyed because I didn't have any more of this really good thread color match, but it's okay. Most of my outside top stitching is done and all that's left is the inside top stitching. So it's okay if that's a little bit more off color because that's like the facing and only I'm ultimately going to see that. But with my facings prepped, it's now time for me to pin them where they're going to belong in the forever run. Weird way to say it, but here we are. And then like usual, after doing that initial sewing, I'm going to clip my seams, clip my corners, get this ready to look really nice. Before then understitching it so I can get this to lay nice and flat without having to do too many anchor stitches on the facing itself. And then I'm going to iron that neckline using my sewing ham. Pressing a neckline takes just a lot of time. Even with the understitching, that does make it significantly easier. You're still maneuvering this from a ton of different angles to get everything to lay exactly the way you want. And then I am focusing on the hem. Again, I cut off 6 inches and then I am hemming this back up about 3 inches. So I took 9 whole inches off this hem because again, I hate the way this type of dress looks at T-length for me. If I'm gonna go T-length, I want like a pretty big ruffle or something. I don't really like a clean edge T-length, which isn't fully logical, but it's the way I am. So yeah, I cut a lot off. I'm still also leaving a pretty deep hem. And then I am easing those the basting that I put in earlier before, of course, pressing that down. And then I will sew that down with a slip stitch all the way around the edge before then also finishing the facings and other things in the dress that just need to be kind of like basted down. And at this point, I have decided I can't live without the matching bolero for this dress. So I have hunted around eBay and Etsy and everywhere that I look for vintage patterns, and I have hunted down the exact same pattern that actually has the bolero pieces and ordered it. So I'm going to tackle the bolero next weekend. And we are back a week later. I have the completed pattern with the bolero, and I also realized that I played at very high risk with not even having enough fabric for the bolero. This was all the fabric I had left, so I had to do a little bit of puzzle piece putting together to try to figure out how I was going to make this amount of fabric work for my bolero, but I was determined. After figuring out how to get the regular fabric to work and got all my pieces cut, I am then turning my attention to both cutting out the inner facing, which I just need for the collar, and the front, like where the buttons go. And then I will also be cutting out some lining pieces. For the lining, I'm just using a plain cotton that I got for $1 a yard. That is high enough quality to use as a lining, although it is usually fabric I reserve for mock-ups. And then I'm going to start by interfacing for my bodice and all that good stuff. Before then, starting like usual and tackling the darts. Making a bolero usually guarantees that I will be sewing up at least 12 darts, which is not my fave. But you have 2 for the back, 2 for the front. So you have 6 total just for the outside, and then you have 6 total for the lining, so boo, but it's okay. Darts are actually really important when you make garments, so even if it's not my favorite, I just gotta suck it up and do it. From there, I'm going to press out the darts, and then I'm going to pin together the back seam to sew that up. And from there, I'll be sewing up the side seams and the shoulder seams. And before I forget, I did a quick stitching in of my label to the lining. It's always easier if I remember to do it before I have to hand sew it. And then I'm going to turn my focus to the collar. So to get my bolero pieces to work, I actually had to cut my collar pieces on a cut instead of a fold. So I first have to pin them and sew them together. This wasn't ideal, but it was my only option. But then once those are sewn together, I can put on the interfacing. And then after sewing these together, I'm going to cut all my corners and curves like always. I feel like I'm always saying that, but it's a really important part of sewing, and it does make a pretty big game changer when it comes to up leveling your sewing. However, after I finished that, this was a real moment of trusting the project because this collar was looking real ugly. The pattern basically calculates for the collar to be pretty big and fold over, which means at this state it looks really baggy and really ugly. And then because of the baggy collar weirdness that's making me anxious, I'm going to actually baste this solo to the outside fabric, putting the baggy side to the right side of the outside fabric, just because I can't handle the easing of this collar with all this bagginess, and then also figure out the lining. And then one of my favorite thing about boleros is how they mimic the dress itself in a lot of cases. I've seen this done in a lot of ways with trim and stuff. So because the bust line of the dress has that lace, I also want the bust line of the bolero to have that lace. So I am putting this in the same way I put it in for the dress. And then I'm folding it over and ironing it now before adding the lining, so that way I don't have to deal with trying to avoid the lining getting involved in this process. And now I'm finally pinning on the lining. We have the lining right side facing the outside fabric, right side, and then the collar is kind of sandwiched in the middle. And from there, I'm cutting all my corners and curves with my shears before then going through and understitching everything. And then here is where you can see trusting the process worked. This collar now looks way less bizarre now that it's rolled over, and all that excess fabric is letting it roll over, I think, and lay flatter in theory. I don't know. I'm not fully sold on the concept of the collars being so drastically different to the front and the back, but it's fine. It ultimately doesn't really matter. And once that is all successfully ironed, I am then focusing along the hem. So I'm going to roll that over by slightly more than what I rolled over the outside fabric before then pinning it under the lace. And I'm also doing something similar while working on the sleeves. From here, I'm going to pop in the buttonholes. There's only 2 for this whole bolero, which is interesting. And then as well as finishing all that hand sewing on the hems, I have popped on these 2 glass buttons that I think are super cute. And with that, we're all ready for the reveal. All right, we have made it through the reveal. I hope you enjoyed it. It was a very fun reveal. The person who grew the garden came out while I was there. He was excited about me taking photos of my dresses and very excited I knew what fireweed was on site, which fireweed's really common in Colorado. So I just thought that was a fun little connection or conversation I got to have because I was out in public doing things. A lot of times being out in public doing things makes me a little bit uncomfortable, but I love when I get to compliment people on their garden friends and like kind of talk to them about what I'm doing. So that was super neat. But with that, we're going to hop into the cost breakdown. So like I said, this is my kind of more budget friendly sewing project. So for the fabric, this is technically upholstery fabric, I think, or like home decor fabric, which I found you can sew with. You just have to be pretty strategic about it, which is why like using a gored skirt instead of a gathered skirt and stuff like that works great for it. So the fabric was $15.30. I did pick it up in Korea, but you could find fabric like this stateside as well. And then as far as notions, this only needed a zipper and the lace was really, really cheap. So that was $2.75. I got the lace secondhand at Sailor Creative. And then the pattern was $26.86. So this is actually the most expensive part. And this is because I originally was using the first pattern. Then I couldn't find even the first pattern's pattern pieces, which my bad for the way I split my patterns. I ended up using a second pattern that I didn't own the Bolero to. So then I ended up hunting down that version of a pattern with the Bolero, which means this is a brand new pattern essentially that I haven't used before because I bought a second one that was $26.86. The original pattern I had paid $12 because it didn't have the Bolero. So the pattern ended up being more expensive than it should have been initially. But as a result, this totaled $44.91 supplies. This is a really great price. This is a two-piece set under $50 with lace. It looks good. It's a beautiful piece. So I think you can make really beautiful, affordable pieces when you sew if you're really intentional about where you like pick things up. And again, you don't have to be in Korea to find $4 fabric. A great place to look here in the States is Fabric Mart. Fabric Mart is who I go to because they put a lot of their stuff like 60 to 90% off all the time on their site. I never buy anything on their site full priced. As far as labor, this took me 10 hours and 45 minutes. It took 2 hours and 45 minutes to cut, 6 to sew, and 2 to do the hand sewing. So I'm going to take that 10 hours and 45 minutes and multiply it by a living wage here in Seattle, which is $35.39, which brings you a labor total of $380.44, which brings us to a full total if I was going to sell this and pay myself a living wage of $425.35. As always, I like to note this is not a one-for-one comparison to what a factory garment is like to produce. I just want us to think some about our labor and how we should be considering how much someone can be paid for an item to still be profitable in the modern day of kind of fast fashion, which now we're going to just kind of go straight into talking about Temu. So I have been getting emails, Instagram DMs, YouTube DMs. I didn't even know that brands could DM you on YouTube, but they can. Temu has been working really hard to pay me for a sponsorship. I, of course, am not interested. I know that will shock you all, but because they really want me to talk about them, I'm happy to oblige and talk about some things that, for legal reasons, that Temu is alleged to participate in. So I have the first, they use unethical labor. According to both like the actual government, US government, and many reports, they are using forced labor out of China, especially to produce cotton. This is a common problem actually across fast fashion. Shein does it, Nike does it, Adidas does it. Like there's a lot of brands that have been caught doing it, but it is assumed because of the costs and the way their supply chain works that Temu is participating in forced labor. Buying things that are made through forced labor isn't cool, no matter how cheap they are. And then another thing that Temu does is they have been caught again and again stealing the IP or intellectual property of small businesses, both stateside, internationally, everywhere and anywhere they can steal from, they do. They've been caught so many times. Again, the US government has actually stated a warning against this. The most frustrating discourse I see about both Temu and Shein is people are like, oh, these small businesses are just drop shipping these mass-produced items. And so why would I pay the small business when I can get the same thing mass-produced? And the answer is no, Temu is actually stealing those images and then producing cheap knockoff copies of these small businesses' hard work. So that's actually like a really gross thing to say like, why would I pay a small business for this when I can get it cheaper from somebody who stole their ideas? Like, how would you feel if you produced something you thought was really beautiful and you were selling it to make your living and another company just comes in, take the exact same photos, the exact same everything, and and sells a like knockoff cheaper product that also, for another point, has toxic chemicals in it. Temu has been caught of having lead, PFAs, and phthalates found in their products multiple times. This has been a problem as long as Temu has been around. You can find these in products kind of across the board, but one of the reasons that Temu can actually get around it more than other companies is because of the way they ship things and the way the import laws work for them. Before we go into what I mean by that, all of these things like lead and PFAs and phthalates are all found to cause issues for children, for the elderly, for autoimmune issues. Like, this is a problem. If you don't care about the garment workers, I hope you at least care about the people around you and the people in your life and yourself enough that you don't want to expose yourself to products that are going to contain this amount. Another thing that does happen is because of, again, the way these get imported, oftentimes for children's clothing, there is also flammability issues. Again, technically all of this is alleged. I have a big list of sources down below that you can read about it, but it's particularly concerning because Temu, these things have been found in products designed for children. I don't know, the idea of children being exposed to these chemicals is really upsetting to me, and hopefully it's really upsetting to you. Around the dodging taxes / import laws, so Temu exploits the under $800 import loophole. So the way a lot of companies work is they ship large quantities to the US that then have to go through customs, go through import laws, taxes, things like that. And then they have like warehouses or whatever here that then disperse products. So the way Temu works is they have basically like third-party vendors that then, because things are so cheap and actually underpriced, Temu's not making a profit from what you're buying from them. They're actually actively like cutting under the market, much like Amazon did and continues to do in their early days. These prices are artificially low. I actually have a quote on this. So the clothing and accessories average about $11 per item. This undermarket pricing means they're exempt from the standard 16.5% import duty and 7.5% tariff specific to China. De minimis packages, which is what I'm talking about, those packages under $800 in value, are also exempt from customs inspection, allowing Shein to ship directly to consumers, helping the company avoid scrutiny over its cotton sourcing. So this dodging of import taxes and dodging of everything does a lot of things for this company. It allows them to not be exposed for the lead and toxic chemicals in their things. It allows them to avoid accountability for using unethical cotton, and it also allows them to not pay taxes. These are all behaviors we do not want to support. That is another reason I would recommend not shopping with Temu. The second to last thing I'm going to say is data breaches and high risk, like generally for your data. So Temu actually collects a lot more data specifically using their app than an app for shopping should. They're like accessing your contacts. They're accessing a lot of things that they should not be able to access. And a lot of people just like click that check mark box and don't think about it. There have been multiple reports of data breaches resulting in stolen credit card and debit card numbers and just generally like data being put out on the internet that you don't want out on the internet, just from like preserving your data, which I know it sounds very silly with all the different ways our data is exploited here in the US, but you don't need yet another company exploiting your data for you to buy cheap things made with toxic chemicals and forced labor. There is also like multiple reports, which Temu of course denies, but there's a lot of reports that there's actual malware and spyware built into the app itself. So all of those things are things that I think we don't want, right? The last thing that I just think is like, it's important, but it bothers me less than everything else on the list. Temu regularly steals from influencers and content creators to advertise their products. This actually has gotten more malicious recently. We've actually started to see some like dubbed over AI voice things, or even changing like the outfit on the influencer and then stealing that footage and using it. That does bother me a lot more. And like, this is still a problem. Like I said, this is like the lowest on my personal list on why I wouldn't shop with Temu, but I do think this is a huge problem. Mia Maples just did a video on Temu stealing photos. I think in the world of all the wrong that Temu is doing, these are very small potatoes, but I do think it's worth mentioning. I guess as an influencer or content creator, I would be quite upset if they took one of my dresses that I made, took the images that I took of that dress and used it to sell dresses made with forced labor. I would be pretty upset about that. So it is a harm. It's just, I would say like this harm is much on a smaller scale compared to all the other harms that I just listed out. And to tag on to that, I just would really, really ask you to think critically about any influencer you see selling Temu. The Financial Diet just put out a really good video about how influencing is kind of like a multi-level marketing scheme. And I like both agree with a lot of what they talk about in this video, but I also disagree. I do think there's a way to do influencing ethically. However, you're not ever going to be able to make as much profit as those influencers who don't care. But also it talks a lot about how influencers are actually usually pretty poor and in debt. And I think it's just a really great perspective on influencing. But like, I have a beef with influencers that will advertise Temu because first of all, Temu is really underpaying. Temu's offer for what they would pay me for a video was laughable. They were offering me $100. I think I had maybe 2,000 subscribers last time I took an $100 video. But it's an egregiously low offer. I'm sure I could negotiate and get it higher if I, was unethical. But the other thing that, in my opinion, influencers and content creators are responsible to do is just some basic research on the brands that they advertise and the products they advertise. Like, if an influencer is willing to sell you literally anything and everything, that is not somebody you should trust their recommendations for at all. For me, as somebody who could be selling you guys products and I choose not to, and I lose a lot of money each year with refusing to partner with brands that I don't consider ethical. It really frustrates me to see influencers who I know are getting exploited by these brands sell for these brands, and like, these influencers don't give a fuck about you. In a lot of cases, they know that Temu has these toxic these data breaches, this forced labor problem, but they don't care because they want a piece of that pie and they want cheap products. They don't actually care about their subscribers. They don't care about the people who watch them. And like, I guess as somebody also in the influencing world, I found that pretty upsetting. The idea that I could sell something that results in lead exposure to a child is really, really upsetting and not something I can live with. I feel really upset by influencers who are advertising for Temu, for Shein, and all of these companies. It's so easy to find. Like, I just think it's an influencer's job as someone who's going to partner with companies and sell you things to make sure that it matches their values, which in this case, I think it does because I think they don't have values. But also, like, I think it's my basic job as an influencer for when a brand DMs me to search brand controversies or like this brand's scandals, just so I'm fully aware of like the downsides of that brand. Because there are some brand scandals that don't matter to me, such as like, there's brands that use wool that vegans want to talk about like how problematic it is that they use wool, but then these vegans are over here using fossil fuel produced plastics, and that personally doesn't jive with my values because wool production, when done correctly, doesn't harm sheep. It's actually necessary for sheep. I'm not gonna go down that rabbit hole. It just bothers me that a lot of influencers don't have any values or morals, and they don't give a fuck about their subscribers and the harm they can cause to these people. And again, I would really, really highly recommend that video by the Financial Diet. I think it talks really, really great about like media literacy, the way it impacts your budget. Because the other thing that I don't want to do is I don't want to sell you guys a lifestyle of overconsumption that's going to put you in debt and harm you financially. And yes, I know we're all adults. We can all make our own decisions. But the way this country works is it's really hard to actually educate around financial literacy. And I think a lot of the way influencer advertising works preys on the lack of media literacy in the States. But that is enough of kind of my rant on Temu. They want me to talk about them, so I'll give them this video for free. They didn't even have to pay me the $100 and send me a bunch of lead-based, forced labor, crappy, breakable products. And again, for legal purposes, this is all alleged, but you can check my sources. The US government backs me on this. So, anywho, talking about the actual project. Oh, everything's falling apart. Here is the jacket. Here is the dress. So first with the dress, I absolutely adore this dress. I think it's really, really, really cute. I have no regrets. I think it fits perfectly. I feel comfortable. I feel pretty. I feel good in it. And I think I did a stand-up job with it. But getting to the bolero. I think I sewed the bolero well, but I will say when I wore it for the day and I had the top button buttoned, I felt so claustrophobic, like incredibly claustrophobic. So once I unbuttoned it, I felt more okay for the day, but I do think if I make this like pattern again, I'm actually going to steal the bolero for my wisteria project because that bolero had a low enough neckline that I felt pretty good. Although I will say I don't know if that bolero would work with this dress because the other problem with these two pieces together, even though they're designed to go together, is I just noticed it was hard to keep the neckline of this dress under the neckline of this bolero, if that makes sense. So I feel like even though these are made to be two cohesive pieces, I don't feel like they actually felt cohesive to me. So I don't know that this was my favorite Bolero pattern. I'm still gonna hold on to this pattern because I really love the neckline and the back and the dress itself, but I don't know, like I said, that I'll be using the Bolero again. I still think this set was incredibly successful. I still really like this set. I just don't see myself using the Bolero as much or wearing it maybe more open style. And then I do see myself wearing this dress a lot, because I do think it's really cute. I think it was really successful, and like the problems with the Bolero don't apply to the dress. I feel like that was a long rant about Temu and not a whole lot of talk about the actual wrap up of this project, but that's mainly because this project went so smoothly and well, which, to be fair, I had made the dress pattern 3 or 4 times before this, so I was pretty familiar with it, and a Bolero pattern isn't too complicated, although the collar was pretty weird to make. Overall, it wasn't that complicated. So yeah, that's gonna wrap us up for today. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you feel more informed about like why you shouldn't be buying from Temu and the risks that you yourself take on. If I was to summarize one reason to not buy from Temu that isn't just the forced labor bit, because I understand that not all people care about forced labor, is that you, from buying from Temu, are putting your financial data and your health at risk. So that is the biggest reason I would personally not be buying from Temu. If you enjoyed this video, you can always subscribe and stick around, and then give me a thumbs up and comment down below. These things actually really help me on the algorithm, and I do read every single comment I get, including the rude ones, which I promptly block. And then of course, if you want to go above and beyond on supporting me, because I turned down all these sponsorships with all these crappy brands, but I don't make a lot of money from this channel, so I do have a Patreon where you can go over and support me for either $5.50 on Patreon a month or $5 on Ko-Fi. I just am making up for the difference of the percentage that Patreon takes. Both, I have the same thing on the platform, and I always really appreciate the support. And with that, I'll see you next week on Friday at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Bye!